Science. It's one of the oldest and most noble pursuits of the human story, seeking objective truth over political whim or fantasy. It's about discovering the difference between fact and fiction, right and wrong, and allowing all of us to discover the truth for ourselves. It's a love of science that drove me to pursue my degree in biomedical sciences, and later my master's in biomedical sciences, policy, and advocacy. But even in my classes like anatomy, chemistry, and physics, I found that today, the science of academia is, more often than not, pushing a political agenda over the pursuit of objective truth. This phenomenon is only getting worse on America's college campuses, as students are forced to trust the science that, with a little digging, factually disproves itself. On today's episode, we're headed to the lab to research the craziest science being pushed on America's campuses at the University of New Hampshire, Georgetown, Wisconsin, Stanford, and Guilford College. We'll get to know a courageous pro-life science student speaking up for truth, and meet a professor who's about as mad scientist as you can get. All this and more, I'm Isabel Brown, and this is On the Front Lines. On campus, the left tries to silence us.
There's a lot of liberal indoctrination.
Universities don't stand for objective truth.
Insulting us, threatening us.
We are on the front lines.
Hi, my name's Austin Clark. I'm a former student at the University of Louisville School of Medicine. I originally went into medicine because I felt a profound religious conviction that I felt would mesh well with the pursuits of medicine. Ultimately, I was dismissed from the University of Louisville School of Medicine unjustly for expressing my religious and pro-life views and for exercising my First Amendment rights. When you're in a profession or about to enter a profession that has the Hippocratic Oath as the standard, you don't expect much pushback, if any. But when the pushback did come, I felt the need to fight back with a lawsuit and feel like this is the right thing to do. This is Austin Clark, and I'm on the front lines.
Please welcome to the show, Austin Clark. Austin, thank you so much for joining us on the front lines today. I'm so excited to talk all things science with you. So let's jump in first and really unpack what drove you to pursue a career in medicine and science.
Sure. Well, I think obviously with medicine, and you're not supposed to say this, it's kind of a taboo, but there's obviously the financial incentive. You know, there's the incentive for, social status and et cetera. But a large portion of what, for me, was a religious motivation. It's more similar of a conscience or a moral or ethical kind of motivation when I say religious. But largely, I would say that's probably the primary driver for me was that religious motivation.
You ended up at the University of Louisville for medical school, and there seemed to be a lot of ideological divides between yourself and your professors and what you were learning in the classroom. Was it apparent to you right away that there was going to be leftist indoctrination away from objective truth and science in your classes, or did that sort of develop over time?
Well, I wouldn't say it was indoctrination necessarily, but there's definitely an ideological bias at campus. When I got accepted, I knew that, for example, that the University of Louisville was the nation's leader, so-called, in LGBTQ healthcare, and that curriculum had just been developed recently. So I knew there was going to be some kind of bias there. And I knew that, for example, that there's also a professor who was recently terminated from the university due to some alleged discrimination or First Amendment retaliation, who was conservative as well. And I knew that the state's two abortion doctors were faculty there, so I expected some kind of ideological bias. But upon enrollment in my courses, it became pretty prevalent. So I'd say I'd had that expectation, but the hostility to my views or my persuasions was not something I expected, and that was pretty prevalent. I think that essentially anything anyone found offensive on campus was pretty much not okay, which is absurd, but that's definitely where it was definitely present for sure.
You started a Students for Life group in the medical school there at the University of Louisville, and it definitely generated a lot of attention in your community. When was it apparent to you that your university was just completely uncomfortable with your pro-life beliefs?
Well, like I said, I think I already knew that there was an issue with the professor, a conservative professor. So I knew that coupled with the ideological factors was pretty clear. But when I invited Dr. Alex McFarland, to speak, the school raised hell. It was there were faculty wanting to protest, there were students wanting to protest. The flyers for the event disappeared, and again, I think they viewed it as hostility to certain identity groups or something, and I don't even think that was really relevant to the topic. But And I really feel that that was when I was targeted as a student. I really feel like they chose to give me a hard time after that.
Tell us about the factors that contributed to you no longer being enrolled at Louisville's medical school.
Sure. Well, my case is really a First Amendment case. One of the issues within that is the pro-life topic, but there's also this issue of free speech while in clinical clerkships. There's the clinical clerkships, as far as the university is concerned, is similar to a classroom. So students have those protected rights while in the classroom. For example, to disagree with the professor, to oppose ideas, to oppose certain, mistreatment or whatever. So really the issue I had that led to me being dismissed was they claim I was being unprofessional or wasn't meeting unprofessional standards. So on campus, typically there's a code of conduct, an overall code of conduct. And that's considered, whether students meet those standards or adhere to those standards is considered non-academic. So students are entitled to a lot of due process. In graduate, particularly medical education, the school standards, that is assessed academically. So academic freedom for the faculty is rooted in the First Amendment, so they can assess me as they see fit. So I'm not entitled to much due process in that. So a faculty member could say I did this, or she doesn't like me, or she thinks I don't do this, et cetera. And I'm not entitled to challenge that because it's considered an academic assessment, like a grade. And that's really what happened. Is the school retaliated and discriminated against me through that academic process, limiting my due process rights, and giving the faculty nearly absolute discretion. And that's what that phenomenon is well known in medical education as well.
Wow.
For example, I wasn't entitled to a hearing. I couldn't, and they can withhold documents, they can do.
So let me just get this straight. You started a Students for Life group, you invited a speaker to your campus, you raised a lot of hell, and your faculty did not appreciate that about you whatsoever. They decide to just kick you out, and they don't give you an opportunity to defend yourself whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, I'm not entitled to that. I'm not entitled to those procedural protections for academic matters. And that's why the distinction's important, because in non-academic matters, I'm entitled to substantially more due process.
Absolutely, yeah.
But like I said, the ideological bias coupled with some free speech that I exercised really just triggered that chain. I call it assassination chain. And it's honestly, it was very traumatizing.
Absolutely.
To go through it.
I can only imagine. How did you decide to take that situation and fight back against the pro-abortion indoctrination you were experiencing and the backlash from your university with legal measures?
Well, it's obviously the most difficult thing I've ever had to do, and it's not something I wanted to do. But I felt like they were being fundamentally unfair. And case law even supports the idea that while the faculty have academic freedom, that they can't act arbitrarily, they can't act capriciously, they can't act in bad faith or with malice. And I felt like this entire process was just full of that.
What's it like embracing that call to sue your university? That's becoming such a common thing for students who have been discriminated against, particularly with their First Amendment rights to free speech on campus. Is it difficult on a day-to-day basis? Was that ever something that you imagined that you would have to do?
No, I never imagined I'd have to go through it. It's, like I said, it's definitely the most difficult thing I've ever had to experience. I feel like they've just been blatantly cruel. I feel like they've been acted contrarily to the principles of academic freedom. The academic freedom. There's also that ethical responsibility to treat students fairly, to be open and honest with them. And I just don't think that they've been that way. I feel like they've acted with a lot of malice. And I mean, and a lot of it's due to a lot of circumstantial evidence. They changed university policy before they dealt with me through the process. They falsified some of my records. They obstructed my attempt to appeal my dismissal.
Yeah.
And I just feel if I was such a terrible student as they assert, that all of these extra measures would have been quite unnecessary. So that's why I say I really feel like they acted with a lot of malice.
What's next for you with your legal journey and your pursuit of medicine educationally and as a career?
Well, we're waiting to see how they respond to the suit. It's my understanding as of now that they've been avoiding service. They haven't. They've been making themselves scarce. I don't know what that means. But the suit has been filed. We're waiting to see if they want to mediate or challenge it. But I mean, again, even to the president of the university and to the faculty there, I mean, I invite them to reach an agreement with me on this. I have no interest in faculty risking their personal assets for this dispute. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's silly. But if that's the path they choose to take, then Tim and I'll go after their assets for that.
Austin, thank you so much for what you're doing to tell the truth to your community on campus and in the medical community at large. We are so glad that you were able to join us here on the front lines, and we can't wait to hear what happens next with your legal battle.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Coming up on State of Campus, the craziness continues, this time at my alma mater. Boo! On the front lines, we'll be right back. Growing up, I used to love Bill Nye the Science Guy. His fun approach to encouraging a love of research and pursuing knowledge made being a nerd a little less, well, nerdy. That is, until he became a talking head for the political left, abandoning the integrity of true science for the changing science of the day. The same can be said for the majority of science professors on our nation's college campuses, who teach their students anything but scientific reality just to push a political agenda. Looking around at the current state of affairs, it's easy to see how much this false science has impacted society. In case you've been living under a rock, men can have babies and should use women's bathrooms. Everyone gets their period, apparently. Abortion is healthcare. Vaccines should be mandatory, and quarantining is no longer about keeping sick people away from the population, but keeping us all away from each other. Oh, and by the way, we're all gonna die from climate change in like 10 years. Here's the kicker though. Don't you dare question any of it. These are Orwellian times, so don't even think about your questions. Just trust the science, because what could go wrong? It's time for your State of Campus. Let's kick things off today at the University of New Hampshire, who announced this year they'd be offering a new course in anti-racism in STEM after publicly declaring that there's no way science as a field can be considered culturally neutral. Science is no longer objective fact, but directly attributes to the discrimination of society. Anti-racism in science, promoting an inclusive and equitable STEM community, is a course detailing the history of racism in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics offered to graduate students at the university. One of the professors leading the course shared, all of us in the U.S. were raised with a 400-year history of racism, and thus we all hold biases, implicit or otherwise. It's difficult for Black, Indigenous people, and people of color to enter and fully participate in STEM disciplines. There's another copy and paste from the woke books, but can someone say demeaning? Imagine telling young kids, hey, I know you want to play soccer, but you're going to lose. And not only are you going to lose, but your teammates and opponents actually hate you because of your face. Would you expect that person to suddenly want to try out? Think they'd ever trust people enough to make friends? I doubt it. Victimhood culture is insidious because it lies to people about who they are and what they are capable of. We all have different gifts and capabilities, but what we all have in common is the right to try anyway. History has shown us that people can overcome great challenges and adversities. So why deprive our current generation of either learning from their failures or succeeding against all odds? No, really, that question wasn't rhetorical. I'm asking you, you leftist lunatics. Heading back to one of my alma maters is always fun, until it's reporting a story like this one. In 2018, Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. announced they'd be introducing a microaggressions in medicine program for students at the School of Medicine to encourage members of the community to respond in real time to microaggressors. According to Georgetown, microaggressions for medical students could include asking someone, aren't you a little too old to be in medical school? Or even asking someone if English was their first language. Never mind the fact that Georgetown is already one of the most diverse schools in the world. Of course, this is obviously what time should be spent on during one's 4 years of medical school to become the best possible physician, policing language and encouraging hurt feelings, rather than embracing your role as one of the most prestigious universities on earth. Because who knows if you'll end up microaggressing a patient by asking them what hurts or how they're feeling. They came to you for help, not harassment, but now that's the same thing. It seems that the woke left wants professionals who are in touch with hurt feelings and sensitive to people's lived experiences. You know, because there aren't already professionals who specialize in feelings. We should have doctors like this, actually. Maybe we can call them therapists. But seriously, I'd rather have a doctor who has a degree in microbiology, not microaggressions. Ever wonder what physics class has to do with the left's war on gender? In the real world, nothing. But on college campuses, everything. Professor Amy Robertson from Seattle Pacific University co-authored a study called Unveiling Privilege to Broaden Participation, in which she dives into what she calls male dominance in the field of physics. I get that a lot of physicists are stereotyped as nerdy men with bad acne who stutter saying hi to women, but this isn't even her reasoning. As shared in her study, Professor Robertson believes white male privilege pervades the discipline of physics, as well as the classrooms in which physics is taught and learned. And physics strongly values male socialized traits such as independence, competition, and individual victories. Independence, a competitive attitude, and winning are male traits only? Ding, 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 we have an idiot. Also, women have now been rendered dependent, non-competitive, and unvictorious in all arenas of life, especially in physics. This year's Anti-Feminist Award goes to Professor Robertson for denying that women have innate traits of success. I sure didn't see that coming. Oh, and don't forget, it's also white males again, because why not include that indefinite talking point? I'm sorry, lady, but someone's race does not pervade the study of matter and energy. There's no way the movement of time and space is determined by the color of your skin. It's a backwards world out there, people, and leftist physics professors are to blame. Amy Robertson, you're on our list. And all you other educators out there, keep it up, and you just might make our professor watch list. Heading back to the campus lab, we're at the University of Wisconsin, where a postdoctoral program in feminist biology is now being offered. Because, haven't you heard, science is sexist. The university says the program will focus on uncovering and reversing gender bias in biology, and will develop new theory and methods in biology that affect feminist approaches. Because nothing says advancing biology like erasing biology altogether. Let's call this focus disrupting and removing gender reality instead. Those who founded the program say the reason for its existence is to remove the male stereotypes constantly prevailing in scientific research and publications, even though the majority of STEM graduates are already women. The first fellow for the program, who is proud to advance feminism, even if it's not actually advancing progress for women, shared, "We aren't doing science well if we ignore the ideas and research of people who aren't male, white, straight, or rich. Feminist science seeks to improve our understanding of the world by including people with different viewpoints. A more inclusive science means an opportunity to make new discoveries." Feminist biology doesn't sound very inclusive, though. In fact, I dare say it sounds pretty exclusive to the non-binary community. I know biology goes against their belief system, but they should still be asked if they want their own course, so we can trust the science. What happens when we ruin chemistry? Before you know it, saying that you have chemistry with a romantic partner is going to be the new hate crime. Ugh. Over on the West Coast, the elite schools are at it again. Stanford University is so biologically progressive, they say we can't tell girls they are good at math anymore. I wish I was joking. A study from the university says that stating girls are as good as boys at math should no longer be encouraged because it unintentionally perpetuates bias. The name of the study? Girls are as good as boys at math implies that boys are probably better. A study of expressions of gender equality. You can't make this stuff up. Actually, I guess you can, but it'll cost you your brain cells. The university said on the surface, the sentence tries to convey that both sexes are equal in their abilities, but because of its grammatical structure, it implies that being good at math is more common or natural for boys than girls. Give me a break. So women are already the majority of graduates in science, technology, engineering, and what did that M stand for? Oh, yeah, math. But telling girls that they're just as good at math as boys is now somehow demeaning to girls? You know what I think? I think the feminists hate math. They hate girls and they hate math and they really hate men. That's what this craziness is all about. Oh, and I don't mean to fact check you, Stanford, but actually I do. Because it turns out that men and women do have cognitive differences. Women are generally better at reading and writing, and hold on to your seat here, but men generally get higher scores in math. They aren't smarter and they don't work harder just because of their biology, but different genders just learn different subjects differently. And don't say I'm wrong, because guess what? This information came from a study at your medical school. Boom, roasted. Apparently, it's not even enough to stop telling people they're capable in STEM fields. In order to truly advance equality, we have to get rid of the oppressive science and math fields altogether. Guilford College in North Carolina recently announced they're considering axing majors at the school in areas such as chemistry, physics, and economics, but plans to keep offering degree programs in gender and ethnic studies. I guess gender studies will help you build a career and change the world better than the subjects that have actually changed the world. They're considering making the change because of 12 straight years of declining enrollment and massive budget cuts in the wake of COVID-19. Thank you, Guilford, for taking the initiative of getting rid of the education that would actually help solve this stupid pandemic. What I find to be so ironic is that the left makes this huge fuss about women and minorities being excluded from industries on the basis of underlying patriarchal or racial oppression. And yet, true advancement and progress on this campus involves getting rid of the opportunity to study these fields altogether. If you think someone can't do something, better make sure no one can. How long until we eliminate the entire science industry because it's inherently sexist and racist? Sadly, we're getting there in 2021. Time to hit the lab and prove them wrong. Are you a STEM student on campus learning anything but science? Share your findings in the comments. And that's your State of Campus. Well, there you have it. Trust the science, but not if it's objective, backed by statistics, or studied by men. And remember, biology is sexist. Physics is a boys' club of strong, independent men. Med school is for feelings, not facts. And STEM is racist. It also now stands for sexist, transphobic, egotistical men. We are so proud of all of the students who stand up for true science. Keep fighting the fight and pursuing objective truth, or we're headed for even more insanity on campus. This is your voice, your stories, your fight. Together, we are on the front lines.